Are there any questions? Can't see very well. Nothing. Okay. So what are the stumbling blocks? Let's have to look at that, isn't it? What are the stumbling blocks? What is it that prevents us from looking here? It's because we're addicted to looking there. It's very simple. It's not complicated, you know. That's just a fact, isn't it? And because we've practiced in our lives not noticing here until it's screaming, until the wheels fall off. That really is the fact. That's our whole system. That's our world. That's our ego. And it's our, even I would suggest it's our psychological system. You know, I mean, these days, maybe more with people now talking about meditation, mindfulness. Now I think there's preventative. Now we're looking at their wheels when they start to wobble. Do you understand? But before, there was like total denial. You know, the thought of having to go to a psychiatrist was the most appalling idea, wasn't it? So we hid everything, you know. We only noticed when the wheels, and then we would sort of begrudgingly go to see somebody because before we kill somebody. But even then, I mean, I always think it's so shocking to hear that, I mean, there's this number, you hear it from the United Nations or somewhere, whatever one of those bodies, that more than 40% of all women, this is not politics, more than 40% of all women who get murdered are murdered by the person in the same bed, roughly speaking. So this is not male or female. This is attachment and anger. This is showing we have zero awareness of what the hell is going on in our mind. So we live like absorbed into each other, living in the same bed in the same house, completely with the expectation of attachment from the other person, with no awareness of one's own self, no awareness of one's own value or worth, putting all your expectations into this other person, and this other person doing exactly the same to you. I mean, it is the recipe for a nightmare. And that's how we live our lives. It's so shocking, you know, it's hard to believe. And even if we are trying to be nice people and practicing, look at us, because we can't control our mouth, because we never tried, you know, because we're so absorbed in the outside world. Because we believe happiness is there, we believe suffering is there, we blame the outside world. We don't just blame the outside world for our suffering, we blame the outside world for our happiness. I mean, look at the cake, it's not my fault. The cake, look what it's doing to me. In other words, the irony of ego is that we are complete victims of the outside world. It's very fascinating. This is how attachment works. So I think we've got to start talking about, let's talk more about attachment, unpack it. It's so revolting. We should be embarrassed. We should be blushing, you know, how shocking it is. But I mean, we should be sad too, because it's the source of our suffering. Attachment's bare bones is this, you know, okay, the three poisons. Okay, got sensory consciousness and we have mental. Then we have the contents of the mind in the mental consciousness. And there, Buddha's view, so simple, embarrassingly simple, not like the complicated neuroscientific views, simple. 3 categories of states of mind. There's no fourth. They're those that are I-based, deceptive, neurotic, delusional, disturbing, afflicted, liars, misconceptions, whatever word you want, and the source of suffering. The misconceptions. Then you have the valid ones. Love, compassion, kindness, intelligence. We know those. They're our saving grace. And there's the trouble is here, Buddha calls these virtue and non-virtue, negative and positive. We don't use those terms in psychology. We think it's too judgmental, you know, because it's so simple when we get it. And then the third category, in general, sometimes they talk about negative, positive, and neutral. Well, neutral just throws us. It sounds like they're not important. But this third category, I like to call them the mechanics of our mind. Because you think about it, you've got concentration, good memory, the ability to discriminate between this and that. There's many of these that whether you're a murderer or a meditator, you need them. So in their nature, they're neither negative nor positive, virtuous nor non-virtuous, but they're crucially important. So it's hard for us to get our head around this concept of negative, positive. But that's when we do understand it, it makes sense. This third lot, that's why I think the mechanics of the mind is a good term. So a sniper needs really good concentration. As Lama Zopa says, thieves need mindfulness. Mindfulness is not what we think, some kind of weird state of being aware. It's a load of rubbish. Mindfulness is this mechanical part of the mind that is the ability to remember what you're doing moment by moment, not losing the plot. You need that when you make a cake. A thief needs it. So it's not a virtue in its nature. When it's combined with compassion, then it becomes virtuous, you know. So these are three categories of states of mind in our mental consciousness, and there's no fourth. It's very kind of settling. It's not complicated. So then the job is to use these mechanics of our mind, the intelligence and concentration and good memory, to work with, use those, develop those, so that we can then do the job of distinguishing between the negative and the positive. That is, I said before, the job of being a Buddhist. And you can't do that until you study the mind. You see, that's where we have a lot of this. We have wonderful techniques in the West now, taking from the Buddha, called mindfulness. People are learning 57 varieties of it. But we have a big misconception that somehow you just got to be aware of what, somehow you've got to watch your mind. It's true. Like we did this morning, you're just watching. There's no analysis, and that's excellent. But what we tend to sometimes think is, I've got to learn to be mindful of whatever's going on in my mind. But there's an added component that we often don't think about, is you can be mindful of your garden. You can sit there with your eyes open and just be mindful. You could do that until you really remember what's in that garden. You could even replicate it in a drawing. That's really good, isn't it? But nothing will ever happen until you combine that with learning botany. Just being mindful is not enough. You can watch what's going on in your mind, supposedly, until the cows come home, but until you know how to identify, this is the extra component, until you know how to identify what you're seeing, until you can recognize there what you're seeing in that drawing, the distinction between weeds and herbs. What is the point of being mindful? It's just idiocy. It's just foolishness. It's just stupidity. So you've got to combine the observing with intelligence by learning Buddha's botany. What is the mind? What is attachment? What is love? What is compassion? Because if you can't distinguish between them, which is the job of being a Buddhist, you're not being a Buddhist. You can think what you like, that you think attachment is. But if you haven't got the definition, you can't do it. And it's not just you don't just make it up. We're using Buddha's very specific model here. You can make up your own. No one says you can't. We're talking Buddhas here. It's a really important point. We know the words love and compassion and kindness and attachment, but if we haven't got the same definition of Buddha, you don't have to have. You can have your definition. Don't be worried about that. But if you want Buddha's definition, you better learn it, please. Because how can you ever, looking at that garden for 49 years, until you learn what is a herb, until you learn what is a weed, you will never know the difference. This is a really important point. The weed won't reveal itself to you. I am a weed. You understand? You've got to learn it in a book. And then you go, oh, now I see a weed. That's learning the theories. So what is attachment? What is it love? These are two, you know. One is a virtue and one is a not. So let's just use an example of a person, like say your child or your boyfriend. You have attachment for them and you love them, both. Hopefully some love there. If there's mainly attachment, that's when, in the romantic relationships, if the beginning is 99% attachment, 99% attachment. So what is it all? What's the process? Well, first of all, the very starting process of attachment rising is dissatisfaction, meaning I'm not enough, meaning I don't have enough. That's its main energy. So that's why, so we think something's missing. That's why we're looking out there for something. Why do you think we're always looking out there? Because it's missing. Because we assume we don't have it. This is the irony of attachment. We assume we don't have it. We assume we are not enough. I don't have enough. And even worse is I'm not enough. That's the energy of dissatisfaction. So naturally you look outside, searching through the lenses of attachment for something that appeals. So then you grab that boy. And then what attachment does, so that it's coming from hunger, coming from incredible hunger of missing something. So it's a symptom of not being enough. Attachment is a symptom of me not being enough. So then the more hungry, the more you're not feeling enough, the more hungry you are. And then the more, when you dump on that boy, let's say the boy, then the attachment then immediately exaggerates. The more the hunger, the more divine he looks. You paint that picture, you know, divine. And then all your expectations, then attachment kicks into becoming expectations. First dissatisfaction, emotional hunger, then searching and kind of searching and to get, and then manipulating and controlling to keep. All the time with the assumption that getting that object will bring you the happiness that you feel you're missing, the satisfaction that you feel you need. All of this is working overtime, all unspoken, all programmed from countless lifetimes of practicing it, you know. And then, of course, you believe he is beautiful, like as if beauty is coursing in his veins along with his blood, isn't it? Naturally. I mean, there's nothing more divine than when you're in love. You can't believe the beauty of that person. Their socks, isn't it? I remember, isn't it? The divineness of that object, like a mother and her baby. Everything about that baby's divine. So it's an advantage. I'm glad my mother had attachment. She would have killed me otherwise. This is like the mothers who kill their babies. They don't have much attachment for their babies. Of course, they're seen as wicked, but just means they haven't got much attachment. And of course, if you didn't have attachment for that baby, of course you'd kill it. It'd make you crazy. But only because you're attached, you don't want to kill it. You're so full of love for it. Because attachment. So attachment exaggerates their beauty, exaggerates their power to make you happy. All of this is a total, continuous, completely programmed fantasy in the mind that's beyond articulate and that we believe totally is the picture. We believe all that story. We believe whatever it presents to us, So, of course, we're setting ourselves up for unbelievable suffering because it's not a valid picture. So this is where the difficulty is. This is where the difficulty is, because this person might have won Mr. America and become the most handsome man on the planet. He could have won that program. You understand what I'm saying? The Mr. They don't have a Mr. America, do they? They have Mr. Universe, don't they? That one. He could have won that. So he could objectively even say he's got the best qualities because you base it on what they say Mr. America looks like. You can still have that. But the picture that attachment paints is an exaggeration. The one key function of all the neuroses, of all the afflictions, is that they exaggerate. They're concepts, but they exaggerate. In that sense, they're not a valid concept. It's like saying 1 + 1 is 3. It's an exaggeration. Therefore, it's not valid. Therefore, what it thinks exists doesn't exist. But it's hard to see it because what you see is what you believe. So it's hard to see what isn't. It's hard to see because we don't even think we're seeing. So I don't think I'm thinking it's a pretty cup. I just think it is a pretty cup. That's the killer. That's why Zama Zopa says everything's our karmic appearance because it's based on karma. And that's also fascinating. How we're locked into this picture of seeing things. And just look at that. The 12 links, for example. This kind of process, this 12 links of dependent arising, this process that goes on in our mind, that we live in the world, and how we kind of lock ourselves into samsara. Well, it's very fascinating when we have certain habits, and this is where karma is so crucial to kick in. So it's important to see how karma plays a role in the way we see things. So I always use the example of this little fisherman boy years ago, 25 years ago in Kopan. A woman came to the room crying, having heard Lama Zopa teach about karma. And she was in tears because her boy, 29-year-old son, had died 5 years before. He'd been a fisherman all his life. So when he met fishing was a little boy. So this is how it works. This is the 12 links. He's been in the lower realms in the past. This is all Buddha's view, right? Comes into this life, that's finished. He gets a human body, like a miracle, gets a human mum. Human quality, human body. And the second way karma ripens, he gets his good tendencies, but one of those tendencies is to kill, because he's killed before. And then what happens? He's a little boy and he's introduced to fishing. He didn't think of fishing until he met the conditions. So that's contact, number 6, I think. He makes contact with the object. And then what that does is instantaneously triggers it's like triggering a memory of having done it before. You meet the object and it's like it wakens up it's like a memory of it. Because you don't think it's a memory because you don't have a past life. You don't know about that. But basically the karma, the extent, and this is the next one now. This is the killer. This is the next one. The next one that's triggered is called feeling. So in that third category, this is a really important one to think about. In that third category of states of mind, like I call the mechanics, it's a very curious one. You've got to think about this. There's one that's called feeling, and this has a big role in the 5 aggregates, in the 12 links. It's a huge one for the Buddha. And feeling is such a curious word to us, but it's a very specific definition here. We say emotions are feelings, but this is not the way they're talking. This third one in this third category, meaning it's neither virtuous nor non-virtuous. But there's only 3 kinds of this feeling. There's a pleasant feeling, which is another word for happy feeling, or joy, or ecstasy, or rapture. I mean, I'm still waiting for that. Do you understand? Any level of good feeling, that's called a feeling, and it's called a pleasant feeling. And that's another word for happiness. Finally, happiness is in the mind. It's a happy feeling, a happy feeling. It can be sensory and it can be mental. Then you've got unhappy feeling, or unpleasant feeling, or really painful feeling, or like the worst suffering in the universe. And then there's neutral feeling. So forget those. All we want is the pleasant ones. That's called happiness. And all we don't want is the unpleasant one. This is so simple, it's embarrassing. So what drives everything we do, and attachment's the driver, is to find the thing, the object, the event, the fishing, the cake, the person, whatever, that you've got contact, that you've got a habit with from past, that will then trigger, upon meeting it, trigger pleasant feelings. That's exactly what happened with him. And the extent of this is the killer, the extent of his pleasant feelings upon contact with that fishing environment, the event, the extent of his pleasant feelings is equal to the extent of his past habit to kill. I always remember there's an Australian journalist who was like the arts writer for Time magazine years ago, Robert Hughes, and he's a poet and a writer, so very eloquent. And he was completely in love with fishing. And he talked about how the first time he went trout fishing, it was like a cosmic experience, meaning he got intense pleasure. Can you hear the word? It triggered incredible pleasure in his mind. So he doesn't know why. His mother didn't teach him. And of course, pleasant feelings are what we want. That's all we want is pleasant feelings. And like a miracle, he stumbles on trout fishing, which triggers the most intense pleasant feelings in his body and mind. So of course he wants to do it again, because the next second, attachment kicks in, the next link, and paints the extent of the pleasant feelings equals the extent of the delicious picture that attachment paints. Are you communicating with me? So that keeps us paralyzed in samsara. So of course he thinks fishing is good. Of course his little boy wants to go fishing again. He found his point, he found his purpose in life. Past contact with it, past fishing, past killing, he meets it again. The extent of his habit to kill equals the extent of his pleasant feeling. This is the killer. So Robert Hughes experienced bliss. There's a guy on death row, a friend of mine in Kentucky. He thinks of torture all the time. So habit in his mind. He doesn't know why. His mother didn't teach him to torture. He wakes up in this life as a human, but he's got a tendency to torture from being an animal in the past, no doubt. And he thinks, because one of the signs of attachment is you think of it all the time. I mean, the best attachment we've got is food. We think of food all the time, isn't it? Aren't we lucky? You don't think of torturing all the time. You don't think of killing fish all the time. You don't think of jumping on little girls all the time. It's habit, karmic imprints, habit. So contact with the object, and then instantaneously the feeling arises depending on the habit you've got. Intense killing, very delicious feelings. You only want delicious feelings, and the next millisecond craving kicks in, which is attachment, that paints a picture and makes it divine. So of course he's going to keep doing it. This is why we find it hard to even resist a piece of cake. There's 12 links. It's clear. It's like we're locked into this, you know. Of course we don't question. Of course, why would we question? The torture doesn't question. I remember reading about that fellow called BTK. Remember years ago in Kansas or somewhere? BTK, 35 years of, he built a dungeon and he would he'd kidnap people, bind them, torture them, and kill them. That's how he got pleasure. That's how he got, as he had to confess in the court to all his 35 murders. That's how he got orgasms. He called it orgasms. And orgasms are just very pleasant feelings. That's all. Just pleasant feelings, very pleasant feelings. That's all it is. That shows the extent of his torture. So he was compelled to do it. And of course, you keep it hidden because you can't do it in public. Fishing you can do in public. Can't torture humans in public, so you do it secret. Of course, it's irresistible. We can't even resist cake. This is the total tragedy, you know. It's a feeling, pleasant feeling. All we want is pleasant feelings. And if from doing negative actions it gives you pleasant feeling, we assume it's good, so we're attached to it. That's why people harm each other. This is what keeps us locked in samsara, you know. So you have to question our assumptions, question our experiences, question everything, analyze. This is an analysis, this is an incredible analysis of experiences. It's amazing, you know. So there I am, in love with Fred, right? Isn't it? And the more hungry I am, the more I dump on him the responsibility. In other words, attachment's a symptom of a very broken person. Attachment's a symptom of a half a person, a quarter of a person, a zero person. I am nothing. So the more you have that, the more you dump responsibility onto the other person. And then what comes along with that expectation which is fierce. It is fierce expectation. Then the second Fred does this tiniest thing that isn't perfect, anger kicks in, because anger is the response when attachment doesn't get what it wants. You know, so fierce. How dare you do that to me? I don't deserve it. And that's the thing about this deserve business. We could speak the rest of the afternoon and tomorrow on just that concept. That attachment and aversion, the two main, you know, these 84,000 Buddha talks about, 84,000 neuroses, 21,000 are rooted in ego grasping, the root delusion. 21,000 are rooted in attachment. 21,000 are rooted in anger. And the fourth 21,000 are rooted in all three. So it's a very kind of coherent view of the mind, you know. And even though for us in our culture, attachment, anger, ignorance, there's these random kind of words, there's this coherent kind of intimate relationship with each other, this hierarchical relationship. And these are the source of all our suffering, you know. They're intimately linked to each other. There's the assumption of an I in the first place, then the emotional hunger to get what that I wants, then the outrage and shock when it doesn't. Ignorance, attachment, aversion. And all the others branch out of there. This is the source of our pain. And then on top of that, our saving grace is what some love, and what's love? Love is may he be happy. You see, Fred, I want him to be happy. I have compassion for Fred. But the trouble is now, as we know, my love and compassion are completely contingent upon whether or not he does what my attachment wants. We know that. So anything that's in that relationship that's useful is coming from love and compassion. Attachment, aversion, and the others destroy whatever's there, you know. If there's any happiness at all in that relationship, it's from the love and compassion and kindness and patience and forgiveness. They're our saving grace. They're our human qualities. The rest we share with animals. There's nothing special about them. So attachment distorts, lies, doesn't present properly what's there, exaggerates, it's I-based, it's greedy, it's an assumption. I mean, the assumption, again, it's multifaceted. Dissatisfaction from practicing it, expectation, controlling, manipulating, possessing. And that's one way when it comes to objects. But then another way of talking about attachment is this assumption. It's an assumption. It's an assumption that I must get what I want every millisecond. That's its nature. And another way to put it is another way to put it is attachment's like this fragile child within us that can only cope with everything being nice. It can't cope with anything that isn't nice. And what nice means is what I want. Because by its nature is its nature is self-centered. So if you have a person who hasn't got much love and compassion, that's what we call a psychopath. That's what we call a psychopath. There's lots of attachment, lots of self-centeredness, lots of anger, lots of arrogance, lots of pride. It's love and compassion and the virtues that are our saving grace, you know. So attachment is this assumption that I must get what I want every second. And that means I must get what I think is nice through the lenses of my needs. So we just see the whole world through the lenses of my needs. And if they fulfill my needs, I call them nice, and I'm prepared to love them. If they don't, if they consciously don't fulfill my needs or do what I don't want, then they're called the enemy, and I have aversion for them, and I do not love them. And then 99.99% of the strangers, like we said this morning, they could all drop dead. I do not care, because they neither harm me nor help me. So we see the entire universe in terms of sentient beings through the lenses of my needs. I mean, we put it this way, it's very blunt. We can see it, but it's kind of shocking, you know. But aren't we fortunate to have an analysis? Because Buddha's given us a method to stop it. Because this is why we suffer, you know. It's just psychology. It's incredible psychology. In my opinion, it's sophisticated. Not that I know so much, but it's incredibly clear, precise, sophisticated psychology. And, you know, it's not a single thing about the object. What your mother did, what your father did, and your genes and your DNA. Of course, they play a role. The Buddha's dealing with the mind itself. It's incredible. So clear, so precise. So you have to have some concentration to go deep inside, to see it, to listen to the stories, to listen to these scripts that our mind is writing all day, every day, and to change the script, rewrite the script. Is all we're trying to do. So all those expectations and whatever Fred does will appear according to my glasses. If I have my attachment glasses on, he'll look delicious. And then as soon as he doesn't do what I want, like slurps his coffee, my anger glasses come on. So he now looks ugly. And I believe that's the story. So one day, so because attachment, you see, because attachment is not sustainable, that's why eventually you stop being in love with somebody. It collapses. We all know that. An attachment, when it starts to deflate, can only turn into two things: indifference or anger. The three poisons. You either you wake up one day, who's this ugly bloke in my bed, and you better leave him before you kill him. Or you wake up one day and who's this boring person in my bed, you know? Because attachment's not sustainable, because it's an exaggerated picture. It's not sustainable. You can't sustain it. That's why it's so devastating when the picture changes. When you suddenly wake up one day and who's this ugly person, you're shocked that you thought you'd think this was such a perfect person. So shocked, you can't believe it. And then many people just live together for the rest of the 70 years, too scared to change. Oprah Winfrey said that the vast majority of women, when they were interviewed, said that the one they had was better than nothing. You understand? It's incredible, isn't it? Better than nothing. Once you've got them, it's better than having nothing, so you put up with it. How you live together like that, I don't know, but people do. I'd rather go to prison than do that. Anyway, blah, blah. So attachment, people. So that the saving grace is the love and compassion. And the fact is we have to practice it. We have to cultivate it. We have to practice it. It's really hard work. Because if Fred's doing what I want, it's easy to love him. That's the point. It's easy to want him to be happy because it's completely contingent on him doing what I want. So it's like, you know, you scratch my back and I'll scratch yours. But the moment he starts doing the wrong things, like slurping his coffee, and my attachments calm down a bit and I can't be bothered so much, you know, then you've got to make effort to be patient. You've got to make effort to want him to be happy. You have to make effort to be compassionate. It's tremendous effort. It doesn't come naturally. It only comes easily when you're in love with him. That doesn't last. So it takes tremendous effort to practice virtue, you know, especially when the person's right there in front of you. But one of the big problems is because I said, no, I've never heard a person say, I can't stop thinking good thoughts. This is the irony of ego, that it's the negative thoughts that seem to shout the loudest. They seem to come uninvited, don't they? So because they come, we assume that's all there is. And so we never think that we can have positive thoughts. It's very funny. You can have a positive thought anytime you like, you can just say it. We never think to. We just keep hearing the negative thoughts, and because they come uninvited, we kind of wait for the good ones to come uninvited as well. But they won't come. You've got to bring them up. You've got to get them out from you've got to get them, they're hiding in the closet and hiding under the mattress. You've got to get them out. Because right now the negative ones run the show. So we keep giving them all the power. We've got to have the positive thoughts. It seems just a simple idea. But you know, when we talk to each other about how we're miserable and we're never satisfied and I'm never doing the right thing and I'm never good enough and it's no good and I'm so angry, and we all have to say is, well, I can learn to be less angry, but we don't want to think it because we'd rather think the bad thought. It's kind of ironic. It's kind of ironic because we don't believe the good thoughts. It's very curious, isn't it? We don't believe the good thoughts. 27 people can say nice words about you. You don't believe it. You're hungry to hear it. You wish they'd say it again and again, but you don't believe it. One person says one bad word about you, we believe it instantly. This proves what we think of ourselves. That proves the irony of ego, isn't it? So all these thoughts are in there, and as long as we start to see them as thoughts, and this takes time to see them as thoughts. This is, you know, if we're not used to seeing our mind, it just seems puzzling. I mean, talking to a person recently on internet, you know, on emails, we're all the same, and talking about this idea. This person's saying how they've got endless negative thoughts about themselves. Join the universe. Uncontrolled thoughts, you know, we say that. All these words we give it. What are these words we say, you know? Obsessive, compulsive, ADHD, all those words. Yeah, they're all there, right? Exactly. Buddha agrees. But then we have to learn to know that they're not set in stone and we can change the thoughts. But it's very hard. And this person, 4 times in the emails, we're talking about it, you know? We're all the same. But what do you mean not believe them? He kept saying. He or she, doesn't matter. What do you believe not believe them? I kept saying, don't try to, our first step is, you can't stop the thoughts. Don't try to stop them. That's silly. First step is one like we did this morning, just watch. Another one is, even in the daytime, you're hearing them all rave on, is try not to believe them. And that was the part, and they kept saying, what do you mean not believe them? It's hard for us to hear that. And why we say that is because we believe them so totally, we can't even hear that we're believing. We just assume they're true. Because we're so used to them. So when we can start to have some objectivity and realize that it's sort of like I think about all my roommates I think of them about roommates in my head, and they're all chatting away. So of course we believe them straight away because we're so fragile. Now the thing is, think of them as like roommates outside. Think of them like a bunch of people on the street outside your front door, and they're all shouting, doing all the thoughts that you're having. You start to realize they're just people having opinions. Well, your thoughts are just opinions. Thoughts are opinions. So what we have to look at what it is that makes us believe that because it just the thought arises, why do we believe it? Because that's the killer. We believe it. I'm so hopeless. I must be evil. Fred must hate me. We say those words when something went wrong, and then we don't even know. We just somehow assume it's true. What do you mean not believe it? We said. It's fascinating. And then when we start to realize it's just a thought, that's like a miracle. That really is showing some space, you know. Then we don't go so crazy. We go mad because we believe the thoughts. We give them absolute power. We give them absolute truth. No wonder we're pulled from pillar to post. No wonder we go up and down like yo-yos, you know. But the huge one is try not to believe them. Try and see they're just thoughts that out of habit are popping up. Just out of habit. Got to catch them. But I mean, even in the West, we say 1,000 thoughts a second. So it's a tremendous job we're talking about doing. It's not easy. We've got to start somewhere. But to know, to have this view that all these emotions that we feel at the tip of our body are rooted in being conceptual thoughts that we've practiced for so long that even our body now feels them, you know, which is what emotion means. Because virtue's also got emotion. We want to practice those. So you begin by seeing the bare bones concept. Love is the thought, may you be happy. That's the definition of love. Then you start with it. Then you grow it. And then that will then bring emotion. That will also affect your body, and tears will come. So there's nothing wrong with the body. We want them to be positive thoughts. So you'll always have happy feelings in your body and your mind. Right now we have unhappy feelings because of all the negative thoughts and pain in the body. The feeling of the body when you're angry or jealous is it's like hell, isn't it? Or even just this feeling of loss. A friend of mine whose husband, she's been with him for 50 years and he died with 27 grandchildren and children, said the pain, she's never known such pain. She means it physically and mentally because the mind and body are so connected. That's because of delusion. You don't suffer because of virtue. See, that's the interesting point. This is mind-blowing for us. This is mind-blowing for us. There's Lama Zopa, you know, supposedly is what he looks like, a holy being who's gone beyond attachment and aversion and jealousy and delusions and ego grasping. And there he gets a stroke, and clearly there's physical pain, because physical is physical. Physical is physical, so there's the feeling there. But this is the thing, because we distinguish between mental, we don't distinguish between sensory and mental. Even when we just stub our toe, that's a sensory experience, right? Just the body. But instantaneously, because we have attachment that only wants nice feelings, and an unpleasant feeling arises, instantaneously anger kicks in and says, how dare that happen? You curse and swear. So then we say, well, of course I'm angry. I just stubbed my toe. No. One is that it's like the eyes seeing a shape and color and the thought deciding it's pretty. One is this feeling in the toe, and two is how dare that happen to me, which is anger. They're separate events. This again is the miracle of distinguishing between sensory and mental and having some control, you know. So Lama Zopa having no attachment, no aversion, no ego grasping, and only having bodhicitta and compassion, blah, blah, let's assume. Then when he has suffering, like a stroke, there can't be suffering. You see, this is the thing. Suffering doesn't come from physical pain. Suffering is suffering is experience. Okay, it is experience in the pain. It's an unpleasant feeling. That's called suffering. It's an unpleasant feeling. It's true. But the degree to which you interpret it with anger makes it a billion times worse. So I remember Curtis Sanchez Rinpoche was here, or Vajrapani, he said it. I'll never forget. He said, for a certain level bodhisattva, the experience of cutting off his hand and feeding it to a starving animal is as inconsequential as a leaf falling off a tree. So what that means is he's got a body, and they're called senses. He's cutting off his hand. There is a feeling there. There's no question. There's only pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. There's only three kinds of feeling. But because there's no delusions in the mind, there's no aversion, there's no panic, there's no fear, there's no ego grasping, there's no attachment, which is what drives us, which is why we all go mad. There's none of that. There is only virtue, only love, only compassion. So therefore, the predominant experience is unbelievable compassion and the wish to alleviate the pain of this animal. So the feeling in his hand is as if it's like a leaf falling off a tree. So that's, it's explained. In the Lama Zopa, when there's a particular photo in the hospital, he's looking radiantly joyful. It's only because he's got virtue. There's no delusions left. So it's delusions that cause us suffering. It's delusions, not virtue. You cannot suffer if you have love and compassion. Now, this is a massive one for us. So we rush into the spiritual path without doing much of the wisdom wing, don't know our mind well. We have compassion, it's true. And then we see so much suffering. And then we become depressed or angry or despairing or freaked out or anxious. And we assume that we suffer because of that suffering. No, we are suffering because of anxiety and aversion and despair and attachment. They cause suffering, not the suffering. So bodhisattvas get more energy. Every time they see suffering, they become more inspired, more determined to never give up, more happy, more joyful, more compassionate, more loving, more wishing to never give up helping others. It gives them energy and encouragement to never give up. It just throws us completely because we have attachment and aversion and anxiety, which is attachment. Anxiety is attachment. Depression is internalized anger. Fear is the root of all of them. They're rooted in fear, all of them. It's their nature. Fear is the character of all the delusions, and they are why we suffer. You cannot suffer because of compassion. You cannot suffer because of love. You do not suffer because you see people suffer. You do not suffer because you see a war zone. You suffer because you have attachment to not seeing a war zone, because you have aversion to seeing a war zone. You have to understand this. And that shows us the liberation. It's not being mean, but you read about these kind people in hospitals during COVID who killed themselves because they couldn't bear the pain. It's not being rude about people. It's an analysis. Their compassion was tremendous, but it was polluted by their attachment and their fears and their anxiety and their despair. Do you understand? When we have this analysis, an incredible analysis, I tell you, it's shocking how clear it is, but it's hard to hear it because it's not how we think in our world. We mix it all up in a big soup, So, and it shows us the liberation. Yeah. It shows us where we can start to change. Yes. Yes. Yes, darling. Talk to me. Huh?
May I slow down what you just said?
Yeah, go.
About COVID and people killing themselves, right?
Yes.
Are you referring to the nurses and the helpers?
I'm talking anybody. I just gave an example of a person who's compassionate and who's helping others, and the suffering is so bad they couldn't cope, so they killed themselves. I'm giving an example of how other people suffering, how we think it's the suffering that causes us to be unhappy.
Yeah. So my question is, what is the person attached to?
Well, okay, good. Thank you. Leave it right there. Attached to having everything be lovely. That's the main way attachment. More than we can say attachment to sex, attachment to drugs, attachment even to reputation. That's another whole discussion. But the broader one is attachment is a junkie in us that only can cope with everything being nice. Everything, my feelings and the world. The world has to be perfect and lovely. The millisecond we see unhappy, we have a panic attack because attachment can't cope with problems. So that's what, the moment attachment doesn't get things to be nice, aversion arises, and aversion is anger, or for some people it turns into despair and depression. That's the bottom line. Attachment is this fragile junkie in us that can only cope with everything being nice. So 1,000 times a day, we're having a panic attack. When you stub your toe, you can't cope because aversion arises. When a person looks mean at you, when the weather's not perfect, when the coffee doesn't taste right, forget about when you see suffering, just unhappy events, baby things. We're like babies, we're like infants, we're like up and down like yo-yos 1,000 times a day because attachment isn't getting what it wants, which is everything to be nice. And it can't get everything nice. So we're always trying. And then aversion arises the millisecond it doesn't get it. So that darling, kind, compassionate person helping sick people in the hospital with compassion, the attachment was tremendous. And we don't see it. That only wants it to be lovely. It isn't lovely. And then you get guilty and you despair and you can't save everybody and you go crazy and you get guilty and you kill yourself because of attachment and aversion and all the delusions. Whereas a bodhisattva who's gone beyond those would get encouragement and would never give up and do more and more and increase. I mean, it's a really highly evolved state. Do you understand me? These are good questions.
This thing about the bodhisattvas, so obviously I'm not a bodhisattva.
Well, whatever we are, never mind. Don't be personal. Let's talk about it. Go on.
Right, but because
hang on, what time's lunch?
how
Wait a
do
second. What
you-
time's lunch, Romy? Okay, good. Go. Yes, go, darling.
how do you not burn out?
That's the point I'm talking about, darling. I'm just answering the question. I'm answering the question. Then you got, okay, I haven't.
Wait.
Oh, let's answer it. You got to know where you're at. If you are trying to be like Arnold Schwarzenegger and carry weights, right? You got to go according to your pace, don't you? You would burn out and break your body if you carried something that's too big because you can't cope. You've got to know where you are at your path, and we don't know that. So we leap in meaning well, trying to help 47 people and wonder why we go crazy because we don't know where we're at. We have to know what our capability is. You have to know how much attachment you've given up, how much anger, how much you can cope with. So if you can't cope with other people's suffering, keep away from them, darling. Keep away from them. We push and we push and we push, and then we get guilty. We have to know our capability. We have to know what we can handle, sweetheart, and then have the courage to say, no, I can't do it. That's intelligence. But then we get guilty, especially when it's family. And then we keep pushing and pushing, darling. We have to be so clear and wise. And it's not easy to do that because we have guilt and shame and this is where the biggest attachment, just to make it all worse, I mean, it's endless. Attachment to being seen as a good girl is one of our worst, most painful attachments. So often the kind people who are gentle, kind, who do jobs to help people, they also, they are kind and you are mummy's helper and you do want to be and you are a good girl and you are helping, but the attachment to being seen as a good girl can destroy that. And that can prevent us from having the wisdom to say, I can't do it. Do you understand? We want to be seen to be a good girl. That's our worst attachment, our deepest attachment. And kind people often have that. And then we wonder why we get used as a doormat. Do you understand, darling? You have to have the courage to know what our level of capability is. Just like you do at the gym, like you do anything, you have to know your level of capability. And we often don't know that. So we push beyond our limits. And then we feel guilty because we can't do it. And then we think we're going to get criticized, all this muck, I know you understand, sweetheart. But we have to know, the point is it's like if you're going to be like Arnold Schwarzenegger, you've got the goal, you see where you're going to go, you go there gradually, you go incrementally. You can become like him, one step at a time. So we have to have this sense that we can move towards, like when you look at Lama Zopa, not, oh, I'm hopeless, I'm no good, I'm not like him, I'll try. No, you move towards it. You have all the methodology, one step at a time. That's why it's so important to know where we're at and do what we can. You understand, darling? And rejoice in our progress. Like I said to Romy. Yeah. We all understand, we're the same. But the key thing here is this distinction in Buddhist psychology, which is so hard to hear. It's so simple, but it's so hard to hear because it's not how we think in our models of the mind in the West, in the modern world. This is absolutely clear distinction between all the conceptual states of mind, the ones that are negative and the ones that are positive, the ones that are virtuous, the ones that are non-virtuous, the ones that are valid, the ones that aren't. It's a clear distinction, and it's an odd concept. We don't think this way in modern psychology. We don't think this way in neuroscience. We give them all equal status as an equal part of a normal person. In fact, the whole idea that you can rid yourself totally of anger and depression is very bizarre in modern psychology. It sounds like mental illness because we assume they're all the normal parts of a normal person. So to think that you can get rid of a whole bunch is too weird for our minds. That's why we've got to, if we want to understand Buddhist psychology, we don't have to. Then we need to learn it and understand these ideas, Then it's encouraging. I mean, we know we'd like to be less angry, less jealous, less depressed. We know we love that. So here's the method. You have to distinguish between the virtues. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. And that demands internal awareness, which demands controlling your body and speech first. Harness the energy of the body and speech. Harness the servants of the mind. Then you can harness the mind, one step at a time. And we should be happy to see the problems. When you go to the gym and you're really looking forward to becoming like Arnold or whoever, you really look at every tiny muscle and you delight. You're excited to get this one bigger and that one smaller. You're not you're excited about the process. You enjoy it. You know where you're heading. We have to have that view here, have a view of our potential. We get so caught up in the status quo. You look in the mirror and you see you're no one like Arnold, so you go kill yourself. But you're getting there. You've got the methods. Buddha's given us the methods. They're all here. Test them, try them out. It's practical psychology. That's why Lama Yeshe was so inspiring to me in the beginning, It's just direct, know your mind. But it's the hardest job we'll ever do. Because we're so addicted to the outside world and we don't notice. We don't notice. We have to start noticing. Blah, blah, blah. Can't change the subject because there's all there is to talk about. So I have to keep talking. Yes. Oh, yes. What happened? Where? Which here is that? Thank you.
Hi, Lisa here. Last week we talked and I realized I was blaming my mother and you realize, well, it's my anger is my habit. And I'm like, I've been pondering that all week. And it's just been so great to know that I have some skin in the game now. And that's where my work is right now. So it looks like today I'm looking at craving now. Maybe craving is where I have to look for the work now, right? What am I craving, right?
Craving attachment is the same.
Exactly.
Works for you.
So that's the clue now. The cravings are the clue, right?
Yeah, because anger is a response when it doesn't get what it wants. So when we see that beneath the frustration, I mean, and we have 1,000 times a day of this anger, aversion, frustration, annoyance, irritation, upset. They're polite words for thwarted attachment.
Yeah, I realize now my craving is wanting something I can't have or wanting something that didn't have.
That's right. Or wanting, that's right.
The past was different than I'll just accept it.
That's
and
right.
Then
that's right. Slowly. It's okay.
Exactly.
Yes. You're on the. That's it.
Thank you.
Exactly. Someone else here. Someone else online. Nothing online, people. If we can change the subject, if you like. I don't want the subject to go to. What new subject there is, I don't know. Go on then. Yes.
Where would you place humor in the mind?
Humor. Well, all I know is that Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa never stop laughing. So all I can say is the more delusion you have, the less delusions you have, the more virtue you have, the more funny you are. That's my observation.
But could you see it as a tactic or a mechanism of the mind? Use it as a...
I don't think you can do it artificially, no. Or let's be funny like those funny people. You can try to be funny. I mean, people practice being funny, don't they? And some of them are very good at it because it's natural. But if you try to do it too artificially, I think that's rather silly. Because I think, what do I know? I mean, I don't have any, but all I know is if I look at Lama Yeshe, he never stopped laughing. So that came naturally. He didn't do it on purpose. I don't believe that. Because he's joyful. I mean, think about humor. That means you got to be happy to be funny, don't you? Don't you think so? Happiness, meaning happy feeling. There's got to be joy there. So if you've got no delusions, you're joyful. So Lama Zopa cackled the whole time and smiled, and Lama Yeshe never stopped laughing. It's because they're joyful, and they're joyful because they haven't got delusions. So it's logical. It's a natural consequence. And I think also you'd say that when you don't have so much delusions, you're more relaxed, therefore less grasping. Therefore you see the fun, they see the craziness of everything. So I think it comes naturally. Go. What?
Could it be used as a way of neutralizing the delusions?
Whose? Your own?
Yes.
What do you mean? You be funny to yourself? What do you mean? Give him the microphone. Keep him the microphone. What do you mean?
Yeah, to to make it more relative, to not to
To
make
whom?
it
Other people or
less
yourself?
exaggerated. To myself, to myself.
What do you, I don't understand. Give an example. How would you say it? to me?
When the delusion arises,
So you're seeing your attachment.
to see my
and then-
attachments, I have to say I'm not going to believe it, and I can have
Oh, yeah,
humor about it.
Shut up, Joe. Give yourself a break, mate. Boom. That's being funny.
Yeah,
That'll do.
yeah.
Sure. Don't take it so seriously. Yes. Cut it right there and don't be ridiculous. Give it a break. No, exactly. That's right. Instead of being all laboring and intense. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. What else? Don't ask me a
Hello,
question.
sorry.
Come on.
Very sorry. The new face of depression is a joyful face. Would
The
you maybe
You mean the other face?
the new face of
the
depression?
new face.
Yeah, many people who committed suicide looked really happy. So
Oh,
I
really?
just yeah, in this new age, it's a little bit
Tell me about
image.
that. That's very interesting.
They're
I don't
very
know.
famous people like that were very happy, apparently, but actually afterwards committed suicide. So I just wanted to know.
I don't know. I haven't heard much or read about that. Have you people read
Robert
about that?
Williams, is that his name? Well, there's many people.
What does that mean?
There's a bunch of people like that. Robin Williams.
What about him? Oh, you mean people who kill themselves are comedians? No, he doesn't mean that. Go on.
Apparently, the appearance that they give is a very joyful, happy one.
People who decide to kill themselves.
But then apparently, after they die, people understand that the truth was that inside they were not really happy. It was just the appearance they were giving. So maybe on one side they were compassionate for others and wanted to share the best of themselves, even though inside they were broken.
No.
Or maybe it's something else.
Well, wouldn't that be, if we take this analysis we're using, all I can go is by what I've learned from the Lamas, the Buddha's view, is some people have a really strong tendency to be kind. I mean, even some people, their voice is kind, their aspect is kind, they're kind, soft people. I mean, really, but often it's true, totally, you mean internally really, really depressed and sad. That can be, so are you suggesting how these two can come together? I really don't understand the question. I'm so sorry. If it's a question. Maybe you just tell us what you know about it. Much better. Don't ask me about it.
You were saying that the virtuous people normally have a lot of happiness. But what I'm saying is I don't agree with that because sometimes.
So wait a second, hang on. So I'm suggesting. So okay, I hear you. But no, please, may I ask you to keep the microphone? So I have to understand your point. So you're saying that I'm suggesting that virtue brings happy feelings, but you're saying you disagree. So good, please, may I hear? Please explain to me. I want to hear clearly.
Okay, so I know many people who, because they want to offer the best of themselves, they give the appearance that they're very happy.
Yes.
But actually, they're not capable of asking for help because they have that too much virtue concept.
Yeah, well,
like,
then it can't be valid virtue, can it? If it's too much of a is it artificial? That's artificial, isn't it? It's not real. Because it seems to me,
but that's where the confusion comes when the bodhicitta and compassion. I mean, sometimes it becomes extreme, it becomes unhealthy. You forget about yourself, and
no,
that's
exactly. I agree with you because then it's not. But it's not what I'm suggesting. I hear you. Then if we get too caught up in it conceptually, it's not real. It's pretend because we're not looking at our mind. I mean, I totally agree with that. Pardon?
the attitude
Yeah.
is authentic. The fact that you want to offer the best of yourself, but you
true, but
don't know.
My feeling is, the way I put that one, is so there are people who have got this kindness, definitely kindness, the ones who want to be kind, but they're not observing their attachment, their hunger and neediness to be seen as a good girl. They're not aware of that aspect of their low self-esteem, and they need to be seen to be a good girl. So then they rush around helping. That's why it drags it down, and they're sad inside.
Don't have the capacity to see themselves in the same light as they will see others.
That's exactly
called self-love, I think.
I agree with you. Totally agree with that. I agree with that analysis. Exactly.
So how to manage that?
By learning to see our own mind. You have to start with seeing our own mind, surely. Isn't that true? It has to be this. I mean,
yeah,
we have to see. This is
the
why
beginning of the
parts is
process.
missing.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, thank you. That was really helpful. Thank you so much. Zoom questions, yeah. I mean, listen, before we start, I can see in my life, in my family, for example, there were 7 siblings, and one of my sisters, Julie, was always the little helper. I was selfish. I didn't help my mother. If the dishes need to be done, I didn't care. I didn't do them. So I can say I was selfish, but in a way, I always knew what I wanted. So it looked selfish, but that's been my saving grace in my life. So it's almost like I've now learned how to be compassionate as well. But I never got caught up in being too much and being seen as a good girl. And that was helpful, but I looked selfish. But it was a good thing, actually, because I always did what I had to do. Even my mother's crying behind me and I'm running ahead, you know, because I somehow... So for me, the one big thing I'm learning is we have to know, what do you want? What do you want? We're too scared to ask that question. We have to know, what do I want? I might want to leave my husband and my 7 children. I have to know that I want it before I even decide what to do. But we're too scared to even say, what do I want? Because we're too scared to upset people. We're too scared to be disliked because we've got attachment to being seen as a good girl. So we have to know, what do I want? What do I want? What do I want? Then we can, that's knowing our own mind. Then we can have courage to say no if we have to. What do I want? You might want to kill your father. You better know it. You better then decide what to do with it. Got to know what I want, whether it's good or bad. What do I want? And we're too scared to ask that question, is my feeling, because we're trying to be good girls, or we're too scared to be seen as bad. So we hide it. You have to know what you want. That's the starting point. The way Lama Zopa puts it, everything exists on the tip of the wish. What do I want? And then if we hear something, oh, I can't do that, it's not possible. Oh, I can't leave my husband, it's not possible. Oh, I can't go to work, it's not possible. Oh, I can't do that. We have to know what we want. The starting point is that. That's what I would suggest. What do you think? I have to call him Lama, I'm sorry. Lama, so what do you think? I'll stumble the word. What do you think of that? Do you agree with that? No.
Sorry, I got lost in my notes.
What?
I
You-
got
what?
lost in my notes from you.
Okay.
You said, how do you know what you want?
No, I did not say that.
Sorry, I wrote, how do you know what you want?
Listen, then listen.
Yes, sir.
Bring it up. Don't be scared. What do I want? You might want to kill your mother. Many people don't even suffocate all their feelings and thoughts and don't know until it happens. Oh my God, what happened? I was killing my mother. Got to listen and ask ourselves, what do I want? I want a cup of tea. Okay. But just,
But
it's not just the only thing. But
nobody really knows what they want.
what?
Otherwise, capitalism wouldn't function so well.
Oh, bugger capitalism. I'm not talking about capitalism. I'm talking about the mind. Have to have work, decide what. And I was selfish and I knew what I was wanted. I always led it. And that's a good thing. It led me in the right direction. Aren't I lucky? Now I can learn to be compassionate. Isn't it? And think of other people. Yes.
One moment.
All right, Peter, what's your observation?
We would like to get this on Zoom, though. The Zoom folks can.
No, please. I want to hear what he has to say.
All right.
I'm running the show here, not you.
She.
Okay, what's your observation? Give him the microphone. Give him the microphone. Take the microphone. Speak in the microphone. Turn it on. And keep it succinct. What's the point? It's not on. Go on.
So Lama Yeshe, Lama Zopa are laughing all the time. Literally.
Okay,
And
go
I
on, go
agree
on.
with
What's
you.
the point?
They're laughing because we're showing them our suffering.
Okay, so
And they've forgotten
Huh?
what it's like to suffer the way we suffer.
no, they haven't. Don't be ridiculous.
Well,
That's what compels their
they
compassion.
not laugh at us.
Okay,
but
they're not
laugh
laughing.
with us.
No, they're not. They're just laughing because they're happy.
That's it.
Yes, spontaneous. Because when you got joy in the mind, you can't help but laugh because there's no delusions left.
Well, when Lama Yeshe would say, you people are too much, it was because we were showing him our suffering.
I know that. I understand. So then, conclusion? You haven't got one. Okay,
Keep
next
breathing.
person. Thank you. Anybody on the Zoom has a question? Come on, talk to me. Listen, I'm sorry. We have to start end soon. I talk so fast. It's ridiculous to go all the way to 12:30. You need a break now. It's enough unless you take over. Please, you take over now and I'll leave. It's done. Any questions on Zoom?
I wanted to.
Where? Who?
This is
Who?
Laura.
Where are you, Laura?
In Maui.
Okay, good, Laura. Talk to me, sweetheart.
Okay. So what I hear Osel saying is he's talking about spiritual bypassing, that
Does he? I
term.
don't know. Yeah, or whatever. Go
Yeah,
on then.
that's an important term because a lot of
Yeah.
us who are in the Dharma see
Yeah.
what I hear also Osel talking about is
Yeah.
that people have this urge for compassion. They've taken the Bodhisattva vows. They're
Then
trying,
yes,
but they're
fair enough.
not looking within. They're not
That's right.
asking
Exactly. So you're just
questions.
repeating what I said, and I'm glad you
Yes,
agree with me.
yes, but there's a term out there that is used quite often, and it's called spiritual
Well, okay, that's
bypassing.
very nice. I'm very happy to hear it. Thank you for that.
Okay.
I have heard it before, but I never use it. That's
All
why
right.
we have to know what we want. We have to look like we're being selfish, and I'm not trying to mean it in a silly way.
Yeah.
It means some kind of, and you've got to cultivate it.
Yes,
Checking, what do I
absolutely.
want? Or
Yeah.
even what's the, like someone says you want to come for a cup of tea. Check. Maybe not.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I don't want to sound stupid, but we've got different personalities. Some people tend more towards that side, which can look selfish. That's why I'm one of them. Or can more towards the overtly compassionate side. And there's always going to be an imbalance, So I was probably mean to people and selfish. Never lifted a hand to help my mother. So there was a selfish aspect to me, but there's a good side to that. So there's a good side to being compassionate, but there's also the bad side when it's mixed with attachment. That's what I'd like to say, put that way. So we've got to work out what our style is,
Right, right.
Do you understand?
But it can only be done, like you said, through analytical
What? What?
It can only be done, like you said, through analytical practices
And by
and
starting in
checking
here,
up and
listening in
asking
here.
questions,
Yes.
listening inside and
It's not
asking
constantly
questions.
craving the external
Yeah.
sign from the other people that I just said the right thing. Since we're born, we've been hungrily waiting for mummy to praise us. It's
Right.
the deepest delusion possible. It's the deepest attachment, more than sex, drugs, rock and roll and everything. They say the yogis in the mountains are up there giving up sex, drugs and rock and roll, but they're still thinking of what the people down in the village are thinking about them. This is the closest one to ego grasping, and the one, if we can't hear, we're a mess. Got to stop wanting to be loved by others. Praise, even it's not even just praise. It's like verified as real. We don't think we're real until someone smiles at us. I mean, it shows how demented we are. We've got to verify ourselves. That's what it means listening to ourselves. Verify yourself. I'm doing a good job. I'm okay. Sure, you have a basis, Buddha's views. I don't know. I'm just raving on. Time to finish. You can't have me for another 30 minutes. You go mad. Why don't, please, when you take over for me? I'll leave now and you can chat. I want you to talk. I'm leaving now. I want it. Yeah. Oh, I say I'll wait then. Or I'll sit. We'll swap chairs. Come on. It's your turn. I've done enough. I've said enough.